is Clayton Howe's Entertainment X. For this episode, I chat with Paul Alexander Nolan, and we cover a little bit of everything, from growing up in California with his early inspirations and lessons from farming, through lessons learned in kindness, early on mentors, and roles that taught him the most about himself, and so much more. So I hope you enjoy this part one with Paul Alexander Nolan.
We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me on Zoom is Paul Alexander Nolan. Paul, thank you for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for asking.
Ooh, this is fun. This is going to be a fun conversation. We connected some dots with Disney Cruise Line before we started chatting. Most recently, though, Parade, which you were absolutely fantastic in. I love your commitment to every role that you play. It's so incredibly committed and honest. I want to get into that a little bit, but before we do, take it back to the beginning of time for you. What were your entertainment dreams growing up in Canada?
I love this question because it's important to revisit where we came from and what was our impetus for starting this. I've told the story a lot, but I grew up in a very small town in Saskatchewan in Saskatchewan, Canada, where the arts weren't a big part of our community. Sports oriented, like many places in North America. So I kind of had this talent that was riding under the surface and hiding under the surface for a long time, and eventually discovered it and started to lean into it, but kind of privately. So my dreams as a kid, I didn't even know what were possible. I hadn't seen commercial theater, but it was really when Les Mis toured through Regina, Saskatchewan, that I saw myself in the show, because I saw the kid playing Gavroche. So I really was part of this Gavroche generation that a lot of young people saw themselves in that show, and it launched their dreams to do it for a living. Until then, I had just done it because I found it fun to be involved in theater and community theater and high school theater, etc. So I would say that at that point on, I knew, when I'm grown up, I'm going to move to Toronto and I'm going to pursue a career as a musical theater performer.
Was there a defining moment for you? Was there a particular moment in time where you made the decision?
It was in that exact moment, seeing that kid come out, this probably 4'10". He may have been 10 years old, but I was a runt at 13. So I saw, I was still as small as that. I could have played that role. My voice didn't change till I was 15. And so I thought I could do that. And so that it was from then on that I realized, that's where I'm headed. And my sister Adrienne lived in Toronto at that point. So I had a reason to, go there and have a sense of security, because I grew up in a town that was less than 500 people, Toronto being, whatever the population is of Toronto now, 7-8 million. Or is it that big? I'm probably way out of touch here. It might be 3.
What did your parents teach you about work ethic?
A lot. I mean, my father was a farmer, and mom was a farm wife, but essentially she also did all the books for the farm, the accounting, and eventually had other jobs. I'm sure she was going stir crazy on the farm, so she took jobs in the city and opened a business, etc. My dad worked tirelessly on the farm. It's constantly opening week on a farm in Saskatchewan, especially at seeding and harvest. But there's always stuff to do, things to fix. The business of running a farm is complicated, and so I always saw them really from dusk to dawn busy. Mom had a humongous garden growing vegetables, a beautiful vegetable garden that I hated having to go work in, pulling weeds. From a time that I was very young, maybe 8 or 9 years old, I was always out working in the yard. When the weekend came, I didn't get to have, free reign of running around. I wasn't busy all the time doing that. I got to be a kid a little bit, but I really liked going out to the tractor with my dad and working with him out there and seeing things about machines and when he'd let me, I'd ride the lawnmower, which was um, sorry, I realized my mic might have cut out there for a second.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Here in Canada, the technology coming in and out. I use it as an excuse to get out and run one of those little riding mowers, and there's pictures of me as a 5-year-old riding around on those things. So, yeah, I mean, it was a big. Farms are a lot of work, and
Yeah.
and both my parents worked tirelessly. So I definitely got a healthy dose of work ethic from them.
Was there any particular, or do you have any particular story of working out there with your dad, and him just being like, push on through, we can't stop until we're done and the sun is setting?
Well, I do have a story that's actually a little bit the opposite.
Okay.
My sister and I were given the job of scraping all the paint off of a barn on the farm, and because it was peeling off, and back then the paint was different, and Saskatchewan winters are real harsh, so after a few years you start to see chipping on the paint. We had to go out there with those scrapers, those metal scrapers, and scrape it off by hand, get all the bits that were peeling off of there so we could repaint it. I might have been 10 years old and really would rather have been playing with my buddies. It was the summer months, so I wasn't in school during the week. I wanted to be out playing all day.
Yeah.
I started faking an asthma attack so that I could get out of working. And of course, they all knew I was full of it. So they let me stay in after noon. And of course, I snuck out and went and played with my friends. Well, my dad caught me. So they all knew I'd been lying. So that gives you an idea of the kind of work that farm kids do. Even at 10 years old, you're out doing manual labor and learning how to put in a good day. Whereas my sister had to continue the job that day, and she's never let me forget it since.
I love it. Thanks for sharing it. Do you have particular lessons or standout moments on what your parents taught you about kindness?
My mother is an incredibly thoughtful person, and I really think that we pick up things genetically from our parents. And I do have to I think my wife would disagree with me. I think she finds me kind, but I don't, that she doesn't get to, be in my head 24/7. So I think that I always look to people like my mom and my wife as my teachers for generosity and kindness and patience. And because my mother was and is still a very thoughtful person. She always has a gift that for people that she's thought about and found and taken the time to find. And at 80 years old, nearly, she still does that. So, but there's a wonderful moment that my mom was working in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. It's about 25 minutes from Rollo, the town I grew up in. And I think she, I was a real mama's boy as a kid. I really loved having my mom's hugs and stuff. And so I was really missing her being around all the time. As an adult, I see that this was great for her mental health because it gave her some independence. It gave her a little bit of money and gave her a sense of, self again. She raised 5 children, and I'm not a mother, but I can see that it's the hardest job on earth.
Yeah.
So when she took this job, she was gone more than I was used to, and I think she noticed that I was suffering a little bit, and so she brought me home these really cool pajamas that were like an NHL referee's outfit. There's black and white stripes on top and black pants on the bottom, and I thought they were the coolest thing on earth. And my wife actually knows that story and bought me the same pair of pajamas for our wedding night because she, because it's such an epic story of thoughtfulness. And yeah.
Do you have? Oh, I love that. Do you have any mentors? And are there any standout lessons?
I do. I have. I mean, in my mind, I have many mentors. mentors, but in the true sense of people that um, are a continuous part of my development in an active way. Yeah, I do. My friend Kathy McKinnon is a mentor to me. She's the head of voice at the Stratford Festival in Canada, and a good friend, one of my best friends. And Carol Rosenfeld, who is an actor in New York, living in New Jersey, but teaches a lot down at Uta Hagen's school that I'm dropping the name of right now. It's one of the most famous schools in New York.
Yeah.
Do you know it?
Oh yeah,
I'm forgetting. The Actors Studio.
Yes.
And Carol is, an exceptionally generous person. And when I'm kind of having trouble figuring out the seed of a character, I call Carol. It's been a while, but she'll always show up and be there for actors. She works tirelessly with actors, young and old, and she, her passion for acting is inspiring.
What?
I forget the second half of the question.
No. It was just mentors and standout lessons. But in terms of, if we touch on acting for a little bit, the honesty, that I brought up at the very beginning of this was there a particular moment in time for you in your career of performing and honing in the craft? I'm just sure it's still happening, where you got incredibly honest. I love how open you are on a stage in a way that I haven't seen from many individuals. So kudos and thank you for that, because it's incredibly entertaining and educational through the roles I've seen you play, but also your own journey with that. Was there any lesson?
I think that I was just having a conversation about the thing I'm about to say last night with Kathy McKinnon here in Stratford. The artist doesn't get to know themselves as an audience knows them. So to hear that, you find my performances honest is, I take it as a compliment. But I don't necessarily get to know what that means. But I'll try to interpret it. When I was in school at the Randolph Academy in Toronto as a 18, 19-year-old, I had a teacher named Diane LeWarren, and Diane, she taught our musical theater presentation class. And I sang the late Stephen Sondheim's song I Remember from Evening Primrose. It's a stunning song, full of imagery. And historically, Diane always wanted me to be doing more in these songs, but I think even at that young age, really I had an allergy to not being truthful. And at that time, I think she was trying to get me to be more expressive. And she wasn't asking me not to be truthful, but I didn't know how to be more expressive and truthful at the same time. So I remember I finished the song and she looked at me and asked me if I had muscles in my face. She said, "Paul, do you have muscles in your face?" It was very funny, like the way she said it, and I took it with love. But yeah, I think that I don't know. I think that there was always something in me that was looking for truthfulness within the genre of whatever I was working on. Because I think, as Des McAnuff says, there are different modes of truth. If you are in a farce and you're trying to do realism and subtlety, it's not the right truth for the farce. Or if you're in, we see it all over. We see it all over television right now. The truth in a broad comedy like Arrested Development is different than the truth in Law and Order. So that is always something when I start a new musicals are similar in that, from one musical to another, there are different sets of rules. And so you always feel like you're starting over again, trying to understand what acting is. And I find it endlessly fascinating because, of course, all actors have strengths and weaknesses. And if you're lucky, you have a lot of different genre strengths because it helps you work a little more.
Yeah. Is there a particular role that has taught you the most about yourself?
As a person, I don't know, maybe Guy in Once, but I think it's more accurate to talk about it as an artist. I don't think there's a singular role. I think that you can learn by like watching what you're gravitating towards, and that shifts. I really think that roles follow me around, and I don't sometimes understand why I've been asked to do certain roles, or I don't exactly think that I'm cast properly until I'm kind of in the room working on them. Once in a while I'll take a role and I'll know exactly what that thing is. There's just something about it, and it's a really intuitive process for me. You know, I sometimes can't break it down why I understand something or why I don't, but really getting in the room with other artists and molding it together is what I really love.
How do you find the balance between letting things happen and making things happen in your career?
Oh, that's a really good question, because the more I try to make things happen, I think the more frustrated I get. But you do have to do, for example, during the pandemic, I got tired of sitting around, so I started applying to firefighter schools, and and I got into a firefighter school and accepted it, and it was 2 weeks before starting school, and I got a call from Robert O'Hara asking if I'd be interested in doing the remount of Slave Play that we did last Christmas into January. And so, but unless I had made these plans to do something with my life, first of all, I would have sat around for 8 more months before that call happened, going crazy and probably falling slightly into sadness. But also, in some weird way, I feel like those choices help generate opportunities. They help us, attract the universe's kindness. And I will say, like, I've always had my foot a little bit out the door with this business. I resent having something else control whether I get to work or not. And so for that reason, I think I've always kind of been like, yeah, I'm good without this. And I don't know if that is true or not, because when I get on stage with specific in specific events, like with Parade, who, not only do I love that show and have loved it since I was 18, when Jessica Rush gave me the album on Disney Cruise Line, but I love Michael Arden. I've believed in him tremendously since I saw the first piece I saw him direct, which was Spring Awakening, and then worked with him on My Fair Lady. So that, and I know Michael works from a really tremendously respectful and honest place. So he attracts these other artists that you're suddenly in a room with great artists with great respect. And, like all of these things actually make up the whole. You could have Parade, which is an exceptional piece of theater, exceptional composition, exceptional lyrics, but you don't have the right director for it. So the actors aren't happy. They don't do their best work. They're not in an environment where they can take risks and, find out what the thing is not, which to me is really more interesting than finding out what it is. Because that's where you're in the sense of play. So, does that answer the question?
It does. And I love that you bring up, it's the energy of like shifting. It's like if I'm waiting for my phone to ring, the second I get up and move around, the phone rings. But when you're sitting there, it doesn't happen. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I mean, I'm interested if we could touch for a moment on finding out what it isn't or what it's not. Where does that come from for you, and how does that translate into your everyday life and your choices, or is that more something that just sits within the play of acting and performing?
I think I spent a lot of years trying to do things right. From the outside, when you're watching a performance, I just saw Jefferson Mays in the unbelievable Christmas Carol that Michael Arden directed, and I kind of went in I know I digress quite a bit. I'm sorry. I notice your podcast has shorter episodes, so I try to
and
be
longer, and I have longer ones, so it's fine.
Okay,
It's all good.
Okay. Well, I expected Jefferson to be astonishing, which he was. I expected Michael's work to be great, which it was. But what I didn't expect was it to be magic. It was theater magic. The way they designed it, to the way Michael directed, the use of light, it just, like, we were constantly in a magic show, and all of those elements together were extraordinary. Now I'll go back to the question you asked was, which is, I spent a lot of time trying to do things right. We watch a performance like Jefferson Mays and think that, that's a locked in performance, or that's the right way to do it. Well, he spent time exploring how to approach the text, how to approach the characters, etc. We didn't get to see the process, which is an audience that's right and good. We want to see the performance, which is shiftable and changeable from night to night. But we see tonight's performance. So I spent a lot of time trying, thinking that there was a right way to do things in my career, trying to please the director, please, try to make, in a way, it's like, goes back to try to make mom and dad proud. Well, I don't know where it shifted for me necessarily, but in and around 2009, I worked with the director in Stratford, Gary Griffin, on West Side Story, and he was a tough director, but he taught me a lot about acting. And from that point forward, I started working with, something dropped for me, and that I started kind of working on process more than product. And it's still in my genes to want to be good, to want to get things right. But I fight that when I walk into a room now, even in auditions. I try to not treat auditions like product, but as a process. I try to treat auditions like I'm going to rehearsal, and that has, worked for me. As far as just in my own artistry, I get to walk out of there thinking that is what I intended to do, and I went in and did what I intended to do, versus, I'm guessing what they want, and, I didn't do that right, or they didn't hire me, or this or that. I just use it as an opportunity to work. And so when I say I am looking for what a thing isn't, it means that I am giving myself the opportunity to fail over and over and over again. I think that text, when it's good, when writing is good, will generally take care of you. And sometimes we get in the writing's way by doing too much or doing too little, or adding stuff that isn't really necessary. I mean, in one of the performances of Parade, in my scene with Eddie Cooper, who played Newt Lee, I did something and immediately thought, ooh, why'd I do this? I can't get out of this. And it's not a good choice. And I don't typically think, oh, this isn't a good choice while I'm working. I'm just playing. And when I'm with scene partners who really trust me, especially in something like what we had to do in Parade, I'm deeply grateful to that scene partner for letting me, play like that. Hannah Ellis let me play extensively when we did Knoxville down in Sarasota earlier this year. And so that's where I'm really having the best time, is when I'm given like the trust to figure out what something isn't. And you will make mistakes. You will from time to time slip up. But what I think you get in return is electricity. I think you get something that's alive versus something that's locked. You might get something that's locked and good, but you're never going to get something that's alive and amazing, So I'd say these words out loud, and I think, people listening will be, think that it's easy. Well, it's a process. It's a constant challenge to myself, because there's this element of me that's always trying to be the best or get it right, or, whatever that is. And I'm always kind of trying to not do that. And I will say that is sometimes just exclusive to me working as an artist, because in real life, it's very different. I compartmentalize my job and my personal life very much so. My job is here, and I don't talk about my job when I go home. My wife, I'm sure I drive Keely nuts because I come home, she asks me how the day is, and I don't want to talk about the facts of my day. I don't want to describe my process as an artist, because it's kind of intuitive, and it's definitely intentional, but also intuitive and hard to describe. I don't know. And I find that kind of fun, but I also find it like, oh man, it's really risky not to really know what I'm doing.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.